We live in an age of noise, constant opinions, judgments, and pressure to prove ourselves. But what if I told you the greatest transformations don't happen in the spotlight? They happen in silence, in waiting, in surrender, when we stop forcing, stop chasing, and simply let life unfold naturally. When you live in reaction mode, life pulls you in every direction. Someone says something, and you fire back. Someone doubts you, and you feel the need to justify. Someone criticizes you, and you break down. That is emotional slavery, being owned by everything around you. But when you embrace silence, you become free. You no longer feel the need to prove. You no longer feel the need to respond. You no longer need validation, because your power comes from within, and you know it. This isn't about staying quiet to please others. No, this is about staying silent because you know who you are, and you don't need to say a word to prove it. You don't chase, you attract. You don't beg, you receive. You don't rush, you trust. Let the world make noise. You don't have to participate. Let people assume. Let them misunderstand you. You are not here to fight every false narrative. Your silence will disturb more than your argument ever could. Because there is something hauntingly powerful about a person who doesn't react. That's how legends move. That's how warriors walk. That's how wise people lead. They speak when it's time, and they stay silent when it's not. And in that silence, everything comes: answers, peace, growth, and the kind of confidence that doesn't need applause to feel real. So when the world gets too loud, go within. When the pressure to speak becomes overwhelming, stay still. Let your silence rise above the noise, because it will. And when it does, the world will finally hear you. Nature never hurries, but everything gets done. That one truth, if understood deeply, can change the way you move through life. Look at the world around you. Really look. The trees don't rush to grow. The sun doesn't stress about rising. The seasons don't force themselves to change faster. Yet, everything unfolds in perfect rhythm, in complete silence, without announcement, without panic, without needing recognition, and somehow everything thrives. Nature is a master of silent power. The most powerful forces on Earth: gravity, wind, time work invisibly, steadily, and without noise. They don't ask for attention. They don't shout to be noticed. But their impact is undeniable. Now ask yourself, why do we live in such a rush? Why do we feel the need to force things, to chase things, to prove we're doing enough? Because somewhere along the way, we were taught that growth must be loud, that success must be visible, that healing must be explained. But nature teaches us something very different. That silence is not absence. It's presence in its purest form. The seed buried underground does not scream to be seen. It breaks in silence. It struggles in silence. It transforms in silence. And one day, it rises not because it shouted the loudest, but because it trusted the process. The rain didn't skip it. The sun didn't forget it. Nature remembered. Life remembered. Growth happened naturally, quietly, powerfully. You are no different. There will be seasons in your life where nothing makes sense, where no one sees your effort, where the world assumes you're doing nothing. But in those seasons, your roots are growing deeper. Your strength is being built in silence. Don't rush to bloom. Don't force the harvest. Your spring will come not by force, but by faith. Silent growth is sacred growth. And that's where the beauty of this path begins, when you stop trying to control the timing and start aligning with the rhythm. When you stop screaming for results and start trusting the season you're in. And in that space in the space where you're no longer reacting, no longer forcing, no longer chasing, you begin to hear something else. Your inner voice, the one you forgot was even there. You see, it's not just about muting the world. It's about turning up the volume on your own soul. But here's the truth most people miss. Your inner voice is soft. It doesn't compete with the chaos. It waits. It whispers. It nudges. And most of us are too busy, too loud, too distracted to hear it. But once the noise dies down, once you stop needing to explain, to be seen, to be right, that voice returns. And when it does, something powerful happens. You start to remember who you are, not who the world told you to be, not who you've been pretending to be, but who you were before the noise, before the trauma, before the pressure. That voice carries truth. It carries wisdom. It carries direction. But you won't find it in the opinions of others. You won't find it in external approval. You'll find it in stillness, in those long walks alone, in the quiet moments before sleep, in the tears that fall when no one is watching. That's the sacred space where clarity is born. Your inner voice doesn't yell, it guides. It doesn't beg, it nudges. It doesn't rush, it waits for you to become still enough to listen. And here's the most freeing part. Once you start listening to that voice, you no longer need the world's permission. You don't need to explain your path. You don't need to justify your timing. You don't need to win arguments. You just move quietly, confidently, with purpose, like the moon shining even in silence. Because when your inner voice awakens, you walk differently, you speak less, but your words carry more. You need less, but your energy attracts more. You chase less, but life begins to move toward you. That's the shift that happens when you move from noise to knowing. And you'll notice it in small ways. First, the peace that fills you. When you stop explaining, the calm that replaces the anxiety, the ease that replaces the forcing. And suddenly, you realize everything you were looking for out there was always inside of you. But it took silence to find it. There's a strange, sacred space in life where everything goes quiet, where nothing seems to be moving. Nothing is changing. And it feels like the entire world is passing you by. We call this phase many things: a waiting season, a dry spell, rock bottom. But in truth, it is something far more powerful. The stillness before the storm. It's the moment right before the breakthrough, right before life changes, right before the light returns. And yet, this is the phase that breaks most people. Not because it's painful, but because it's silent. We are so used to measuring progress by visible movement. If something's not growing fast, we assume it's dying. If results don't come quickly, we assume we've failed. If life feels still, we panic as if motion is the only sign of purpose. But nature tells a different story. Before a seed sprouts, it's buried in darkness before dawn. The world is at its coldest before the river flows with force. It slows. To a still crawl, stillness is not the absence of movement, it is the presence of preparation. It is the sacred pause before the rise. It is life holding its breath before it exhales something magnificent. So if you're in that space right now, if you feel like nothing's changing, like the silence is suffocating, like your dreams are stuck, remember, the greatest storms are always preceded by the deepest calm. You're not stuck. You're not broken. You're being readied. You're being aligned. You're being taught how to wait without losing yourself. Because if you can survive the silence, you're ready for the noise of the storm. But here's the hardest part for most people. You can't force your way out of this phase. You can't manipulate timing. You can't demand results. You can't fast forward the season. And that brings us to the next deeper truth, one of the most difficult lessons life will ever teach you. You have to let go of control. Control is a beautiful illusion. It makes us feel powerful, safe, responsible. But often, it becomes a prison disguised as discipline. We try to control people's perceptions. We try to control outcomes. We even try to control timing, success, healing, and growth, as if life is something to be managed like a machine. But here's the truth that will set you free. The more you try to control, the more life slips through your fingers. When you force things, they resist. When you chase, they run. When you cling, they crumble. But when you release, when you surrender, when you trust, everything begins to align. Not because you did less, but because you finally allowed life to do more. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It doesn't mean apathy. It means releasing the illusion that you are the master of timing. There's a kind of strength that doesn't need a stage, a kind of power that doesn't need to shout, and a kind of courage that shows itself not in reaction, but in restraint. We're often told that strength looks like boldness, like speaking out, like showing up loud and proud. But the truth is, some of the strongest people you'll ever meet are the ones who say the least. They're not silent because they're weak. They're silent because they've mastered the most difficult skill of all, self-control. When someone disrespects you, the world teaches you to fight back. When someone doubts you, you're told to prove them wrong. When someone misunderstands, you feel the urge to explain, to defend, to correct. But what if true power is knowing you could say something but choosing not to? What if the highest form of strength is being unshaken by words, unbothered by noise, unchained from the need to be understood? There's a quiet dignity in restraint, a deep, grounded power in walking away when your ego is screaming to engage. And here's the truth. Not every battle is worth fighting. Not every comment deserves a reply. Not every insult requires a defense. Not every opinion should have the power to touch your peace. Sometimes silence is the most intelligent response. Sometimes stillness is the loudest statement. Sometimes walking away is the most powerful move you can make. Why? Because when you don't react, you rise. You step above the noise. You break the cycle. You stop feeding the chaos. And most of all, you protect your energy. your mind, your soul. People might think you're weak. Let them. They might call you passive. Let them. They might misunderstand your silence. Let them. You don't need to prove your strength when you know it. Your silence is not your silence, it's your shield. Your restraint is not absence, it's awareness. Your lack of reaction is not fear, it's freedom. Because here's what most people never realize. When you react, you give your power away. When you respond with silence, you keep your power in your hands. This kind of mastery doesn't come overnight. It is learned, often in pain. It comes through heartbreak, through disappointment, through betrayal, through all the moments when you used to fight, to scream, to beg, and realized none of it changed anything. So eventually, you stopped talking. You stopped defending. You stopped chasing justice through arguments. And instead, you start building in silence. This is the beginning of mastery. In a world full of noise, there's something magnetic about someone who says nothing, but walks in with presence. You've felt it before. Someone enters the room. They don't boast. They don't need to speak. But somehow, everyone turns to look. Why? Because presence doesn't come from the mouth, it comes from the soul. This is the power of inner stillness, a kind of energy that can't be faked. It's not about appearance, status, or performance. It's about alignment when your inner world is calm, grounded, and silent. That energy radiates outward without a single word being spoken. When you stop chasing attention, you become the center of it. When you stop trying to be seen, you become unforgettable. When you stop trying to prove your worth, you walk like you already know it. That's presence. It's not about ego. It's not about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the calmest spirit in the storm. And people feel that. In relationships, leadership, creativity, and even healing. Presence is power. But presence doesn't come from knowing all the answers. It comes from being okay with not needing them right away. It comes from trusting the silence instead of filling it. It comes from learning how to sit with yourself without distraction and still feel whole. The truth is, the most magnetic people are often the ones who have been broken and rebuilt in silence. They've faced the storm. They've sat through long nights of confusion, waiting, surrender, and growth. They've cried in rooms where no one could see. They've healed in places where no one could applaud. And now, they carry that stillness with them. It's not arrogance. It's peace. They don't need to speak loudly because their presence already says, I know who I am. I've walked through fire. I don't need your approval. I already gave it to myself. And it's in this state of deep presence that something truly powerful begins to unfold. Life starts moving toward you. This is what most people miss. When you stop chasing, the right things start arriving. Not because you forced them, not because you manipulated them, but because you finally became ready for them. See, timing is not something you control. It's something you prepare for. And sometimes that preparation looks like silence, stillness. Emptiness. Long seasons of nothing changing. But here's the truth. Just because you don't see the results yet doesn't mean the process isn't working. Like fruit ripening in the sun, like roots stretching quietly underground. Everything that is meant for you is already on its way. It's moving silently, aligning with your growth. And when the time is right, it won't feel forced. It'll feel natural, effortless, right? But for that to happen, you must first become someone who can receive it. Because life won't give you what you're screaming for. It gives you what you're ready for. That means learning patience, learning trust, learning to stop pulling on doors that are not meant to open, learning to stop explaining your worth to people who can't hear your value. When you stop trying to make everything happen, you begin to let everything come. The job, the relationship. The peace. The growth, the clarity, not through noise, not through begging, not through chasing, but through alignment. That's the final truth in this journey. Everything will come when you are no longer desperate for it, but prepared to receive it. That's what the silence was doing. It wasn't delaying you. It was transforming you. It was building the version of you that's not just hoping for blessings, but is ready to carry them. And that version doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't force. They sit in silence, fully present. And life thrive.